Oh, hush. Silly cat. What are you whistling about? And we are here. We are back. We are together again. Good to see you all. I am Tad. It is 7 p.m. on a Sunday evening here in California. And many of you I know are probably here in California also, since this is American night. Last night was Europe night. Tonight is American night. Not that those distinctions are hard and fast by any means. We get Americans on the late night broadcast, and I get the occasional European on the on the Sunday evening broadcast. So it more or less all works out. But anyway, I am here. I'm going to be reading. I will not spend a huge amount of time tonight talking about my usual nonsense, only because I talked about the usual nonsense at some length in the previous reading, and I assume that many of you are actually, even if you missed them, you're checking them out, trying to keep them in order, and therefore it must be tedious in the extreme to hear me maundering on again and again about the same issues, which of course I am, because I never do anything much besides work and visit with friends occasionally if they're kind enough to come over, because it's hard to get me out of the house and work. So the only work update I have is since last night I have finished my redraft of Splintered Sun, but as I said also last night, I still have to go back and go back through a certain section of the book, chapters 35 through 41 to be specific, out of 56, to actually go back and check and make sure I got everything right, because I changed a bunch of things around in the order of events and things like that, and so I have to make sure that it makes sense now. And of course, if it had made sense in the first place, I wouldn't have had to change the order of events, now would I? But this often happens in this novel writing scam we've got going on, particularly when you realize, oh, I need to change that, I need to move that around time-wise, and then you suddenly realize you've completely muddled things, and you have to go back and make sure that the timeline still works, and that the things that happen in one chapter don't happen before crucial things that set them up. And so, you have to flop things around or rewrite bits and stuff. So I have to do that still, and I have to write the lyrics for 3 different songs. And that's pretty much what I have to do at the moment. So again, no complaints at all, perfectly happy, like to do work. I didn't get as much done today as I would have liked, of course, because Johnny decided this was going to be his day to be a jerk. So when Deb went out with our friend to go get some lunch and do things, and I thought, good, I'll settle in and I'll get this stuff done that I have to get done. Every time I would come downstairs to the office, I would hear the sound of Johnny growling upstairs, which means he's pissed off at Lemon about something, nothing, Lemon not properly being respectful maybe, or Lemon enjoying something in a way that made Johnny feel grumpy. Who knows? Anyway, so after about the 4th, 5th time that I went up the stairs and broke up the confab, never scolding or anything, mostly just walking between them and engaging with whichever dog is having the issue and paying some attention to them and all that. But anyway, after about 4 or 5 times, it became clear that whatever Johnny's issue was, which is probably mostly just being old and grumpy, I was not going to get any work done. So I waited until Deb got back and then sat down and had an hour and a half or so of actual working time. So I managed to get that finished, or at least, as I said, I got the redraft finished. Anyway, So that's really all there is to say. Today's bad behavior by Johnny aside, dogs are getting along well. Cats, as you may or may not notice, are flitting around in the background here. They seem to be fine. They are getting all the attention and care that cats should get. And anything else? No, not much else of significance, really. It's, as I said, it's the weekend. I'm working. That's not unusual. I tend to work at least some part of every day, just because, I don't know, it justifies my existence or something. Some weird Protestant work ethic thing that somehow crept into me when I was young. I always used to think I was lazy, and then I realized, no, I'm only lazy when I'm doing things I really don't want to do. And then later on, as I got older, I went, even though I have to do things I don't want to do, if I just do them right away, then they're done. And then I can just goof off or whatever. And of course, I don't usually goof off. I usually wind up either taking a nap or going back to work again. But I do try to get things done and out of the way now. That is like perhaps one of the only ways in which I have matured in the last 50 years or so. But yay, it's better than nothing. You know, it's good not to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And fighting against things that you have to do is definitely a mistake. I think parenthood has had a lot to do with that. For those of you who have not had kids, those of you who had kids will instantly know about this and empathize. But for those of you who don't have kids, good for you. But that's the thing about kids is it doesn't matter what else you need to do. It does not matter. If your kids are crying or hungry or they need to get dressed and taken to school or whatever, you can't say to them, hang on, I'll be with you in half an hour. It has to be dealt with, and that's all there is to it. So that kind of made me into more of a pragmatist, I believe. Anyway, before I start reading more of Sleeping Late on Judgment Day, I'm just going to pop over here and see if I have any people to say hello to, meaning anybody who's put their comments in where I can read them. All right, hang on. Why does this stuff jump around all the time? I don't understand it. Sometimes I've got a place where I can access the comments. Other times I do not. At the moment I don't seem to, but I know I should. All right, where did we get it before? It's different every time. I don't understand why they do this to me. Why are they not just nice to me? Mark is here. That's Mark Gamble. Melanie is here. Melanie Meters. I've never known Melanie, how that's pronounced. Emily Bell, my friend. Hello. Good to see you. Jeremy Ehrman, another friend, a longtime friend. James D. Scott. Good to see you, James. Thank you for joining us. Tracy McClatchy. Alexis Terzian. Hello. Did you know that Alexis is a character in The Navigator's Children? She is. I'll let you guess which character she is. It's not a big part, but she's in there. Under another name, of course. You know, I don't think there are any Scythe named Terzian. Although, not a bad idea. Might work. Anyway, so hello, Alexis. Nice to see you. Tim Speckens. Hello, Tim. Isaac. Tim, my buddy. Mark Craigbaum. Susan Shamblin. Claudia War. Mark Marino. And Joanna McCallum. Christy Sanders. There's a few people who've checked in. So lovely to see you all. Pleasure to spend time with you as always. And so I'm going to go ahead and read, if that's okay. Not that I can hear you if you say, no, Tad, please don't. It's wired to explode if you read anything. But why anybody would do that is kind of beyond me anyway. What would we call it? Speed read. I don't know. Just thinking. Like the movie Speed? Okay, I shouldn't have to explain that to you. You're a smart bunch. I'll just assume that you all got it. Not that it was really much of anything worth getting. I am kind of giddy tonight for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, so without further ado, I am going to go ahead and start reading again. For those of you who were not tuned in last night or have not had a chance to watch that one yet, basically Bobby's attackers from the previous week got away after he found his sofa gun and held them for a while and tried to ask some questions of them. And the only thing he discovered was that the two younger guys both had the black sun tattooed on their arm, which is, among other things, a kind of weird right wing racial cult mystic thing, the Sonnenrad. It's called the Sun Wheel. And they had that. And so he's trying to find out more about that and who these people might be who seem to think that he's already got Elagor's horn or something. They want him for something. And after that, he got a call from Edie Parmenter, the young girl who he had seen in the first book at the auction for the feather when he didn't know it was a feather. And he asked Edie if he could possibly talk to her, the person who had paid her to be there because of her expertise in supernatural objects. And she hooked him up with this guy named Dr. Gustavus, and Bobby drove all the way over the hill to the far side of the hill, the ocean side of the hill near Half Moon Bay, which is in the same place as it is in the real world, and came in, met this guy after meeting one of his weird nuns who work for him, Russian nuns, and then when Dr. Gustavus called him by his angel name, which nobody should know unless they're angels themselves, and this guy doesn't seem to be, Bobby freaked out and pulled his gun on him. And that's where we are. We are in Chapter 8 of Sleeping Late on Judgment Day, Brain Cramp. I pointed the Belgian automatic at his chest. Alarms were going off in my head, telling me I'd walked right into some kind of trap like the greenest rookie angel who was ever sent out to find a halo stretcher his first night at Camp Zion. "Pardon me?" I asked, "but exactly who the fuck are you, and how do you know any of that?" I'm afraid I wasn't as calm and cool as I'd have liked to be, so if you're my biographer, please fix that part. Gustavus didn't jump back or freak out, but he did look like he took the gun seriously, which was a relief. Half the bastards I've drawn on lately didn't even seem worried. That's what happens when you hang out with demons and loonies, I guess. "Please, point that somewhere else," he said. "You don't need it here. I'm only going to ask one more time. How do you know that name?" "I know lots of names. It's what I do." He gestured to the books that covered every surface and nested along the walls in thousands, like seabirds on the cliffs. "I am a student of sorts, Mr. Dollar. A researcher, like your friend, Mr. Noseda, who is always interested in what the infernal powers are up to. The difference is that I have instead devoted my time to a study of heaven and those who rule there." He knew about me, and he knew about George the Info Pig. What was up with this guy? I didn't get it, but I couldn't just keep waving the gun at him when he wasn't doing anything except cooperating. Unfortunately, there's no cool way to put your gun away again. I thumbed the safety on and slipped it back in my pocket. "Okay, but keep talking." "I've been wanting to meet you for a while, actually. When Edie said you wanted to ask me some questions, well, it seemed like fate." That made me itchy. "Why did you want to meet me?" "Let's not hurry ourselves." He walked past me to the window and stood looking out at the ocean. "Did Edie tell you anything about me?" "Not a thing. Just your name and how to get here." "She's a good girl." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just watched him. "Look, are you going to give me any information about the auction at Islanders Hall?" I said at last. "That's why I'm here." "Oh, if that's all you want, I'll be happy to do it, but I can tell you much more. Why don't you sit down?" There was no obvious seating area, just a few chairs scattered around the room, all covered with old volumes and strange objects. Gustavus scooped a few books off the nearest, moved those to another equally cluttered surface, then gestured. "Please, don't wait for me. I never sit." This guy kept coming up with things that just shut me up. I wasn't used to it. I sat. So, I'll happily tell you about all the other participants in your auction for the angelic feather, although I'm surprised you didn't keep your own notes. It got a little busy there, I said, thinking of Elagor's soldiers and the huge burning thing called a galoo. It had indeed been quite a night. Fine. Then, as a gesture of good faith, he proceeded to name everyone who'd been there, including several Edie had forgotten, and to give me a quick capsule biography of each. None of the names or facts gave me any new thoughts on where Anaita might have hidden Elagor's horn, so I asked him about the Black Sun faction. I know a little about the Black Sun, yes, he said. They're all human, as far as I know, but a most unpleasant group of humans. Several murders have been ascribed to them, as well as countless arsons, robberies, and other crimes. They are political fanatics, the truly dangerous kind. But they were not at the auction, or connected in any way, as far as I know. How about Foxy, then? Mr. Fox, the guy who put the auction together? Do you know anything about him? Who is he? What is he? Gustavus showed me a slight smile. I'm fairly certain he's exactly what he says he is. A fox. Does that mean you find him sexually attractive, or that he's actually a small dog-like predator with a bushy red tail? Not an ordinary fox. A fox spirit. From Japan originally, but you know how crowded that country is. I'm reasonably certain he immigrated here 12 years ago or so. A Japanese fox spirit who deals in stolen supernatural goods from a street corner in downtown Jude? I shrugged. Why not? Nothing else makes any sense, so why should he? I assume my expression was pretty easy to read because Gustavus smiled again. But, as I suggested, Mr. Dollar, I can tell you more useful things than that, especially in your current situation. Shall we bargain? Bargain? Oh, come, I'm a collector. I don't give things away. I adjusted my position so I could reach my gun quickly if I had to. And what do you want in return? Don't tell me it begins with S and ends with O-U-L. He shook his head, his expression like I'd just broken wind. Please, I'm not on that side. I'm not really on either side, although both have more power over me than I'd like. He lifted a fat folio off one of the window sills and held it out, spread open. The page on top was covered with spidery lines and tiny little notes. Please, come closer so you can see. I edged my chair forward, still not sure of him and not wanting to be within arm's reach. Not that Gustavus seemed particularly dangerous. Actually, he looked a bit like some kind of skinny Buddhist druid version of Santa Claus. But he was tall, and his movements suggested he could be quick when he wanted to be. I squinted because I was still a couple of feet distant. It looks like a map of San Judas. Actually, it's a map of the whole peninsula south of San Francisco, down to Alviso. Do you recognize any of the names written on it? Now I really had to squint. I gave up at last and got off the chair. The map had been divided with blue pencil lines into little territories. Right over downtown Jude, at the center of the map, in a blue square labeled Masonic Lodge, and then below it, now Compasses, Tap Room, was a list of names. Neheberoth was the first one, my old off-and-on sweetie Monica Neighbor's real name. Beneath were a couple of dozen others, including Samariel and Deloriel. Yeah, me. I looked up at Gustavus, surprised at how hard my heart was beating. We're all on there. You certainly are. That represents years of work. And if you notice the names grouped around the bar on Parade Street called the emergency room, you will notice that they are members of the opposing tribe. I looked. The crabbed black letters listed Smearhawk, Rotwood, Weep Slug, and several others that I recognized, most of them infernal prosecutors. There was even a note for Shit Squelch, the fanboy prosecutor I'd met that morning. I don't get it. What is this? What is it? History, Mr. Dollar. Some men spend their entire lives studying just the Battle of Bosworth Field or Marathon. Others take a larger view and make the entire War of the Roses or Peloponnesian struggle their area of interest. But the struggle that fascinates me is ongoing. It is the war between heaven and hell. You're a historian? He shrugged. Of a sort. It's a field of study pursued by a small number of researchers, all of us with far more to do than we can ever hope to accomplish. But the quest for knowledge does not relax its standards because of the inadequacy of its devotees. I was really beginning to wonder who this guy was. I'd never heard of him, and yet he'd apparently been around for a while. Was he human or not? So what could you possibly want from me? Gustavus actually looked surprised. Why, information, of course. What else? I have had very few chances to interview any of the actual combatants in this eternal struggle. In return for answering my questions, I can help you find what you're seeking. And how do you even know what that is? He put the folio back on the windowsill and picked up a little bell with a handle, then shook it briskly. I know a great deal, both about your struggle with Eligor the Horseman and your current problems with, let us be discreet, certain of your own comrades. I assure you my methods are nothing sinister. I seek out and buy information, some of it in the form of the books you see here. He waved his hand. But also intelligence that can only be discovered thanks to modern technology. He gestured again, this time at a pretty nice desktop computer perched at one end of the refectory table. But I do not simply gather information, Mr. Dollar. I study it. The door of the huge room opened, startling me a trifle, and another little old nun came in. I only knew it wasn't the same one because her headgear was different, more of a straight, wimply veil thing that fitted close to her head. Sister Kasia, Gustavus said, will you bring some refreshment for our guest and myself? She nodded and tottered out again like something brought only partially to life by an underachieving mad scientist. I was too nonplussed to think of anything to say about all the things Gustavus had just told me, so instead I asked, what's with all the nuns? This property was a Russian convent when I bought it in 1947, my host said. The building itself was deconsecrated, but for various reasons having to do with politics and other things, many of the nuns had nowhere to go. I let those who wished to stay remain here. They help me around the house, they tend the gardens, we grow most of our own food. We have received a few novices over the years, but most of the original group have died. I'd say there are only a dozen or so left out of what was once a congregation of nearly 100. So he'd bought the place in 1947? That was well over 60 years ago, and he didn't look like he could be any older than that himself. Who was this guy? I didn't get a hell vibe off him, but that didn't mean much. You almost never did, unless they wanted you to. Maybe Gustavus was like my gunsmith friend, Orban, who claimed to have lived centuries by the simple expedient of refusing to die. I meet all kinds, I'm telling you. Sister Kasia came back sooner than I would have expected and set out a tray with a pitcher of ice water, a large bunch of grapes, some bread, and a wedge of white cheese. Try it, urged Gustavus. "It comes from our own goats." I took a little, just to be polite. It was actually pretty good, and poured myself a glass of water. After popping a few grapes, I took my chair again. "If we did make this bargain, what kind of information do you want? I mean, I don't know you well at all, but to be honest, there are a lot of things, excuse me, but to be honest, there are a lot of things I couldn't or wouldn't tell you even if I did. Why should I trust this new guy, Gustavus? I still didn't entirely trust Clarence, even though he was another angel, and Sam liked him." "I don't want names," Gustavus said. "As you can see, I have my own sources for those. But what my sources can't tell me is what it is actually like to be an angel of the Lord. I would like to ask you questions about your experiences, your day-to-day routine. In return, Mr. Dollar, I promise I will give you information that will help you, perhaps even make it possible for you to locate the rather unique horn you're looking for." It was the first time he'd mentioned the horn, and the first time I'd had solid confirmation that Eligor's token really was the thing everyone was interested in. I was relieved to know I'd been right, but I still took a moment before replying, since sharing with someone I just met felt like stepping off onto something shaky. "The horn. Right. Do you know where it is?" "No, but I can give you a few suggestions that may save you a great deal of time." "Such as?" "I hardly think it fair that I show you mine before you show me yours." The wintry smile returned. He'd amused himself. "Surely we can find some way to help each other?" By now, I was beginning to almost like the guy, although I wasn't any closer to trusting him. He clearly knew things about me and the other angels that most people didn't know. "Any chance you could tell me a little bit more about yourself, Doc?" I asked. "Where you came from, how long you've been doing this, stuff like that?" He smiled. "It will be a long time before you've earned enough credit for that, Mr. Dollar, but maybe someday." "Okay, and we'll play it your way for now. How about I give you some of what you want to hear first, then you can return the favor. After that, we'll swap back and forth." "Excellent. Tell me about your own experiences, please. Did you first wake up in heaven or here on earth?" So I related the basics of my angelic life, starting with my first memories of waking up in heaven and continuing through my training in Camp Zion with my old sergeant, Leo, and on through the early days of my work as an advocate. I stopped well short of the current mess, with no further mention of Eligor and nothing about my trip to hell, or, most especially, of course, about Kaz. I was economical with names and locations in general, and I kept the recollection to broad strokes, but otherwise told the truth as I remembered it. Gustavus made no notes, but I had a feeling that would come later, and that he wouldn't have forgotten much. "Excellent," he said when I stopped, "and much of it quite informative. I know of Camp Zion, of course, but I have had little chance to hear about the counter-strike units from anyone who actually served in one." His smile this time was less cheerful. "I have spoken with a few who received some rough treatment at their hands, however. Do you remember an armed encounter with Hell's forces at a place on the bay called Guadalupe Slough? I believe your unit, the Lirai, were involved?" "Smugglers had a warehouse, and we hit it," I said. "Nasty fight. It was a few years before my time, though." "Yes, you're right. I had the occasion to speak to a gentleman who went by the name of Eduardo Stainer, at least in human circles, although he was better known to many as Freeze-Gripe, a lower-order demon. He was on death row at Folsom for his later role in a botched hijacking that had killed 2 Brinks guards, and since he was confident he would receive a new body after he went to the gas chamber, then go right back to work for the same infernal masters, he felt comfortable telling me about the firefight at Guadalupe Slough. Your Locagos, Leo, apparently shot him in the face during the raid, and he was still somewhat perturbed about it. He'd healed, but the scars were still very prominent. My heart bleeds for him. The smile again. As did mine. A thoroughly unpleasant fellow. But he was the first live contact I'd had in a long time with any of the opposition soldiers, and because I'm a good listener, he told me a lot more than he intended. Well, that's interesting, sort of, I said. But it's not really what I was hoping for when you said you thought you could help me. It's more interesting than you suspect. You see, a lot of what I'm going to tell you now first came from Freeze Gripe, although I've been able to confirm most of it from other sources. Gustavus was still standing. Apparently he truly didn't sit, and now he walked to the window and leaned against the sill. Outside, the sea had gone dark as the afternoon drew on and the overcast thickened. I noticed for the first time that not only was my host dressed like a hipster monk, his feet were bare. "I suggest you pour yourself a glass of water, Mr. Dollar," he said. "Now I have a few stories to share with you." I'm glad he suggested the water, because within a few minutes I was learning things that not only made my hair curl and my brain cramp, but also made the inside of my mouth feel very, very dry. Chapter 9. Buddhist Druid Christmas. Gustavus said, "I can tell from the way you talk about San Judas Tadeo that you care for the city very much, Mr. Dollar." Really? Nobody had ever accused me of that before. I mean, yeah, I guess I have a sentimental fondness for Jude, sort of along the lines of what you might feel for an alcoholic parent who loves you but keeps setting fires by accident. It is clear. But the problem is you are not taking a long enough view. You just talk, Doc. I'll listen. Again, the slight smile. He wasn't so much cold or aloof, I had decided, as a bit otherworldly. I still wasn't positive he was human, at least the ordinary mortal kind. "Very well," he said. "Let me give you an example of what I mean. Back in the middle of the 19th century, at the height of the gold rush, the Barbary coast of San Francisco was a worldwide hub for adventurers and fortune seekers. One fellow, a gambler and occasional saloon owner, the deeds to these places were passed back and forth in innumerable games of chance, was a man named Portuguese Jake. He was a famously dangerous fighter and was said to have shot more than a few men dead with the pearl-handled Colt he always wore. He eventually went into whiskey and made an immense amount of money selling to the other saloon owners, and the tales of the wicked parties he gave at his mansion on Nob Hill were legendary." I said I'd listen, but I don't see the point. "Stay with me, Mr. Dollar. Perhaps you'll be more interested if I tell you that not only was Portuguese Jake a noted shot and a man with what was called at the time a vast catalogue of vices, he was also known far and wide as an exceptional horseman." "Ah," I said, "horseman. Just so. In any case, Portuguese Jake disappeared during the Great Fire of 1906, and although he does not surface again in histories, I can tell you that a large portion of the assets he collected in San Francisco eventually made their way into the portfolio of a man named Cyrus Van Ladeken, the Major, as everyone called him owing to apparent service at the siege of Fort Canossa in the Spanish-American War. Major Van Ladeken went into the arms business, but instead of building his business in San Francisco, he chose instead to head south to the small but growing municipality of San Judas. Was this Major Van Whatsit guy by any chance an expert horseman too? Gustavus nodded. He certainly owned them and cared about them a great deal. One of his horses nearly won the Preakness, and his studs created much of the Bay Area's prize stock. He built a large mansion on several hundred acres of rolling hills in what is now Atherton Park, and became one of the founders of the modern city of San Judas. Then, in the 1930s, Van Ledeken died, or so we are told. His son, who had apparently been overseas, arrived to take up the family concern. His name was Jasper Van Ledeken, and the resemblance to his father as a young man was said to be uncanny. The second Van Ledeken spread the family fortune into many other areas, including the early foundations of the aerospace industry, what would someday earn the area the name of Silicon Valley. Late in his life, apparently the son also began a partnership with something called the Vald Family Trust, a name I'm sure you'll recognize. Oh yeah. When Van Ledeken was gone, the company was administered by lawyers for both families until eventually Kenneth Vald stepped in. One of the businesses he built was Vald Credit, as you probably know, since VC Inc. continues to dominate the local economy to this day. So what you're telling me is that my least favorite demon, Eligor the Horseman, has been here in this area since the 19th century. Okay, I get it. But what does it mean to me? It means you're asking many of the right questions, but you have to think bigger and longer. He paused. I myself wonder why Eligor found San Jude such a pleasant base of operations. He has several other identities and fortunes in other parts of the world, but he has spent a great deal of his earthly time here. It might be something as simple as enjoying the mild California weather. He certainly spent a great deal of the Renaissance in Italy's similar climate. But I suspect there is more to it than that. What it is that drew him and others here, though, I still can't say. I was trying to wrap my head around all this, but I have to admit it was making me feel stupider rather than smarter. Okay, but what does it have to do with you? I'm coming to that, Mr. Dollar. Patience. First, let's put a few more names on the table. I am told that the matter of this upstart third way has occupied Heaven's attention lately. As William Blake wrote, a robin redbreast in a cage puts all heaven in a rage. Well, so apparently does building a new cage for the robins that your employers consider to be their personal property, because heaven is quite plainly in a rage. Well, most of heaven. But it is those few who are not who interest us. He poured himself a glass of water, but didn't drink. The reason I suspect that you are still struggling to get answers is that you are too close to the problem. Meaning? Meaning that you must distance yourself, both historically and in other ways, to truly understand the situation. At the moment, you fear one enemy even more than Eligor. Isn't that true? This guy seemed to know everything. I guess that's fair to say. One of the very ephors who judges your behavior. An angel of high standing. A principality, in fact. He was good. That was pretty clear, or at least his sources were. Yeah. And I suppose you can name that angel in 3 notes or less. I believe I can. Anaita, angel of moisture. A sudden superstitious reflex made me pause, as if naming her might cause her to appear. Go on. It felt more than a little crazy to have this odd man I'd never met before today, telling me things about my own life, things no ordinary person should know. It was a bit like opening a fortune cookie to read, "Your boss will send you on a business trip to Houston, your youngest child needs dental work, and on Thursday you will receive a tax refund check for $340. Here again, he said, you do not have the necessary perspective. What do you know of this particular angel? Not much, I admitted. She's powerful. She's old. Here is something else to consider. Gustavus finally took a very small and precise sip of water. She was not always an angel. What? You mean she used to be an ordinary person? A mortal? Gustavus shook his head. That I couldn't say. But long before she was considered an angel, she was a goddess. A goddess? You're kidding, right? You mean like Pele, the volcano queen or something? What the hell does that even mean? The world of the immortals is even more complicated than you can imagine. She's had many names, but Anaita, or Anahit, or Anahita, was her name when she was a goddess, too. The ancient Persians revered her. I had to get up for a second to walk around. Bad enough I had an important angel trying to kill me, but a goddess? How does someone get promoted from goddess to angel? Is that even a promotion? Gustavus puffed out his thin cheeks and then sucked them back in again. He did it a couple of more times, and I was just wondering if I was about to hear his mating call when I realized he was laughing. Oh, I like that, Mr. Dollar. Very good. I don't know exactly how it came about, but I can assure you that the entity known as Anaita of the third sphere was once known as Anahit, goddess of moisture and fertility. That was several thousand years ago, of course. I'm sure you know that many of the great lords of hell were once considered gods or goddesses, but how this Anaita changed teams, if you'll forgive the analogy, is a story still undiscovered, although I very much hope to unravel it someday. Okay, so I'm in even worse shape than I thought. I'm not sure this does me a lot of good. You were being patient, Mr. Dollar. Please keep listening. Whether she is goddess or angel is not so much the issue. She is what she is. But it does point up the fact that you are dealing with immortals or near immortals, and you must stop thinking in the same human way. I'm pretty certain I used to be human myself. That might have something to do with it. He waved his long hand, dismissing my remark. I'm sure, but you need to think about these unanswered questions because at least one of them may help you with your most pressing problem. The first two questions. Who wanted this third way, and why? And here's another, just as important. If Anaita and Eligor collaborated to open this new territory, and if they hadn't, there would be no feather and no horn to concern you. How was that collaboration arranged? Remember, these beings are the equivalent of high government ministers of two warring nations, except their respective masters have been at war for uncountable millennia. They cannot simply drop into each other's offices for a chat. In fact, if they were even seen in the same general location, it would be cause for gossip and speculation among both immortals and mortals alike. You're saying that whatever deal they made, it probably didn't happen right off the bat. Exactly, Mr. Dollar. Whoever made the first overture would have moved with incredible caution. What if he or she misjudged the other? Making bargains with the enemy is a capital offense for both parties. And here's another question whose answer might help with our early queries. Who seems to be in charge of this third way? Well, from what my friend says, it's Anaida, or Kephas, as she called herself while she was setting this up. Certainly I've only ever heard him talk about instructions coming from Kephas, no one else. I haven't heard that Eligor's had a single thing to do with the place, which means it was probably her idea. That means she was the one to approach Eligor, not the other way around. Gustavus nodded. Now you're thinking in a useful way. Remember, these beings are immortal, but in the real world their power is more limited. They cannot simply wave their hands and have things happen. At least, not very often, and not without a great outlay of their own energies. Because of that, they tend to use local resources when possible. How did I know that Portuguese Jake and Cyrus van Ledeken and Kenneth Wald are all the same entity? Simple. I followed the money, Mr. Dollar. I intend no humor by that, by the way. And it showed me that while the identities changed, the money that allowed these identities to thrive in our world all came from the same source of funds over the decades, since I first found Eligor's footprints on California soil, as it were. Now, we must follow another trail, also hidden but equally visible to logic, and ultimately that trail should lead to Anaita, and perhaps the answer to your problem. He took another sip. But first it is your turn again to answer my questions, unless you still doubt that I can be useful to you. No, sir. Fire away. This was one of the weirdest days I'd spent on Earth, but I had finally begun to get the swing of how this Gustavus guy worked, and I wanted more. It had never occurred to me that Grand Duke Eligor could have been in San Judas so long, and I realized there were a lot of things like that I hadn't even considered. I let Gustavus guide me through what he wanted, which was a still carefully self-edited version of my last year, including the specifics of my beef with Eligor. I left out my relationship with Kaz and my trip to hell again. There were some things I just wasn't ready to discuss with strangers, even useful ones. But Gustavus seemed to know most of what I'd been doing anyway, at least in general terms. When I surprised him, he would say, "Really?" and nod with approval. He did it a lot, as I described my doings with the Ephors, the angelic fact-finders who had been on my case for a while. "Excellent," he said after I'd answered his last question. "Oh, this is a pleasure to speak to someone on the inside with eyewitness information." "So you've never been to heaven?" He looked genuinely sad. "My information comes from other sources. I have spoken to angels besides you, but only in very guarded conversations, swapping one bit of pertinent information for another equally isolated piece. In fact, I hope we can do this again sometime, you and I." "Yeah, it's possible." I'd been collecting informants myself ever since my Counter-Strike days. George, the ghostly Solihull sisters, and a freaky piece of work called The Broken Boy, just to name a few. But this guy was entirely different in what he knew, and you can never have too many good sources. He took another sip of water. "So, now we return to your current situation. You are under investigation by your superiors, with an unconsummated bargain of some kind remaining between you and Eligor the Horseman. This I infer from your obvious desire to find the horn, plus the many things you have pointedly not told me, despite your willingness to share the other details of your story. More crucially, you are apparently also a target for Anaita, which complicates matters because Anaita has something you seem to want very much, Grand Duke Eligor's horn. Okay, you've proved it. You're smart. Are you going to tell me where it is? Oh, no, Mr. Dollar, no. I'm afraid I don't know where the horn is. But you said... I said I'd help you. Listen to me carefully, and I think you'll agree that I'm keeping my side of the bargain. I've had my fill of bargains lately, to be honest. They seem to keep blowing up in my face. Well, we will complete ours now, in any case, said Gustavus. Honor demands it. I said you needed to take a bigger view, and now I will explain. Eligor has been here and active for more than 100 years. Anaita needed him, or someone like him, so she could accomplish her aims, namely opening a new haven for human souls after death. The whys and wherefores of it still remain to be understood, but we do know one thing. If she needed Eligor, the former goddess is likely to have been the one who made the approach. We also know that something about San Judas appeals to Eligor, and it is his main base of operations. I finally grabbed the thread. So she probably came to him here, on Earth, most likely in San Judas. I think it likely, he said, nodding. And it would not necessarily have been recently. Remember, these beings play a long game. But even if I know how they met, that still doesn't tell me anything about where the horn might be. Perhaps not, but don't be too sure until you actually learn the truth about the first meeting. I can tell you as a scholar that you must follow the questions rather than try to jump straight to the answers. How long has Anaita had a presence here? And what is that presence? That is the next thing you must find, I feel certain. With luck, it will lead you to further answers. It'll lead me to lots of further questions. I can pretty much bet on that. Then, if you're at all like me, you will be a very happy man. Clearly, I wasn't much like him. I didn't want another damn question to answer, let alone 30 or 40 of them. But I had to take what I could get. Some of the things Gustavus had said had definitely set me thinking in new ways. Of course, if Sam had been there, he would have said, "And thinking is what always gets you in trouble." But he always said that about me not thinking, too. Why do I get the feeling, I asked Gustavus, that you could figure out the rest of this in about half an hour? He smiled. I'm honored you think so, but I've just presented you with the results of a great deal of consideration, backed by years of study. Don't overestimate me. I am only, as I said, a researcher, a scholar, to give it an old and honorable title. I have no urge or ability to travel in some of the places you've visited. An oblique reference to my trip to hell, perhaps. I could tell he either knew or had guessed something about it, but I also figured it might buy me some other useful stuff from him later on, so I wasn't giving away that story for free. Another of the little old nuns, or maybe the previous one, stuck her head in. Supper is almost ready, Dr. Gustavus, she said. Ah, would you like to join me, Mr. Dollar? He asked. We are having kale from our own garden tonight, and some lovely carrots, and steamed late-season cauliflower from a local farm. I do not eat meat. No thanks. One more question, though. Where does your name come from? Gustavus. He nodded again slowly, as if this was another deep philosophical question. It was not my given name, but when I was younger and first involved in my field of scholarship, I chose a Latin name, since Latin was the primary language we used in our studies. My given name meant both taste and tongue in my original country, and since I did not think Dr. Tongue suitable, I used the Latin translation for taste. And of course, he paused before the punchline, it allowed me to remind my friends and fellow scholars there's no disputing Gustavus. He waited for me to laugh. I smiled weakly. De gustibus non est disputandum, you see, he said. Ah, I said. He looked disappointed. I admit it is a somewhat dry joke, but it is my own. He didn't come out to see me off, maybe because I hadn't gotten his joke. The last I saw of him, he was standing at the window again, staring out at the dying light and the throbbing Pacific Ocean. Outside, I found the fog had come in to lie across the roads. I almost drove off the edge once, but I eventually got back to Highway 1 and soon was sliding through the misty evening hills, Dexter Gordon's A Swingin' Affair playing quietly on the stereo. The more I thought of what Gustavus had said about Eligor and Anaita, the more I began to feel how hopeless it all was. As if being an angel wasn't complicated enough, I had somehow managed to fall in with gods and monsters. And seriously piss them off. Okay, we don't have too much time left, but I'm going to read a few bits of the next chapter, which is Chapter 10, 4 Arms, No Waiting. I fully expected to find an eviction notice on my apartment door when I got home, or even a couple of police officers wanting to talk to me about guns being fired, but to my surprise, I found neither. I should have moved out right then, I guess. After being haunted and getting my shit all beat up in my own living room, I sure didn't feel quite the same cozy way about the Tierra Green apartment. In fact, I'd never felt cozy about it to begin with, but I was under standing orders from heaven not to move again. Plus, I was sick and tired of people and non-people just waltzing in and out whenever they wanted to. Instead of throwing all my stuff in the trunk of my car and heading for the nearest Econo Lodge like a sensible person, I stopped at a hardware store and got a chain to put on the door and a couple of window locks. At home, I busted out my screwdriver and installed them all. I was doing it mostly to slow down my new friends from the Black Sun. The nastier things I came into contact with from time to time weren't going to be kept away by chains or locks, but at least I'd hear them getting in. When I was done and had eaten the last of Sam's Chinese food order directly out of the fridge, I called George, a.k.a. Fatback. Javier, the old family retainer and pig keeper, picked up the phone because at that time of the evening George was still a human with a pig brain, wallowing naked in mud. I never called George Fatback to his face, by the way. It's not my nickname for him, but I didn't know his real name until I actually met him, so it still slips out from time to time. I asked Javier to let me ring through to his boss's answering machine, and I updated my list of things I wanted George to find out. After that, I called Sam and left a message for him as well. It was strange not automatically trusting Sam the way I used to, but even after all the secrecy and weirdness about his new allegiance, he was still my closest friend, and he'd risked getting shot at my side a few times recently when he hadn't needed to. Also, I decided that whatever my personal reservations were, I really did need to see this third way place of his. If one of Anaita's pet projects was trying to murder my soul, it probably behooved me to know a little bit more about her other hobbies. Oh, and I stashed my sofa gun again. Not in the sofa this time, of course, in case the Black Sun faction came back. Despite the locks I put in, I wasn't that opposed to seeing them again. After all, I still owed Bald Thug a serious beating, and I'm not really a forgiving kind of guy. And next week, we will continue from there and return to the haunting of the Tierra Green apartment. But for now, I am going to hang it up for the weekend. So, lovely to see you all, even Alexis with her rabies, as I see in the comments. Take a couple of aspirin and let me know if the foaming becomes too much. Okay, Tertian? And I am going to, as I said, get going. Maybe go have something to eat. And I will be back next week, barring craziness, fire, floods, sudden, who knows, just anything. But chances are I will be back next week, 1 a.m. and 7 p.m. Sunday, just like usual. I hope you will join me then. Until that blessed moment when we are together once more, I beg you, I ask you, I implore you, please be good to yourselves. Please be good to your friends and your loved ones. And please help to take care of any other souls you might come across who need a kind word, a helping hand, a smile, or a couple of bucks. Whatever you can do to make the world a slightly warmer and kinder place. And so, with that all said, I bid you good evening and peace, and I will see you very soon. Ciao, Bambini.